Avon Barksdale and Marlo Stanfield both rule Baltimore through violence, money, fear, and reputation. But they feel like they come from two different versions of the same city. Avon rules like a man who inherited a game with old rules already built into it. There are corners, towers, crews, soldiers, family ties, sit-downs, favors, grudges, and a certain idea of what a gangster is supposed to be. Marlo rules like a man who looked at all of that and decided most of it was useless decoration. He wants the crown, the corners, the name, and the silence. Everything else can go. That difference is why comparing them is interesting. It is easy to say Avon is old school and Marlo is new school, but that is too clean. Avon is brutal, Marlo is organized. Avon can be emotional, Marlo can be patient. Avon has a code, but the code still leaves dead bodies. Marlo breaks tradition, but he also understands power with a scary clarity. The real difference is in what each man thinks power is for. With Avon, power is connected to territory. The towers mean something, the pit means something. The package, the stash, the muscle, the lieutenants, the family name, the club, the office behind Orlando's, the basketball game, the whole Barksdale machine. All of it makes Avon feel like a king. He wants people to know the name and respect the name. When his crew loses territory, it feels personal, because the territory is part of his identity. When Omar robs him, Avon treats it as an insult before he treats it as a business loss. The money matters, but the disrespect hits him first. Marlo sees territory differently. He wants corners because corners give him proof. He wants his name carried through the street like a threat. He cares about the crown more than the kingdom. Avon wants to rule the board. Marlo wants everybody on the board afraid to say his name wrong. That is why the security guard scene is so important. The guard does not rob him. He does not threaten him. He only speaks to him like a man speaking to another man. Marlo could walk away with his money, his crew, his corners, and his life untouched. Instead, that small moment becomes a death sentence. The guard reminds Marlo that there is still one private place where a regular person might judge him. Marlo cannot allow that place to exist. Avon usually needs disrespect to happen inside the game before he answers it. Omar robbing stash houses, Brandon helping Omar, rival crews pushing into Barksdale territory, people stealing from the package. That is the kind of disrespect Avon understands. It has a shape, it comes from another player, it can be answered with soldiers. Marlo expands the definition until almost anything can become disrespect. A rumor, a glance, a man at a store talking too freely, a kid on a corner looking too independent. Under Avon, you can get killed for crossing the organization. Under Marlo, you can get killed for making Marlo feel visible in the wrong way. That difference shows up in betrayal. Avon takes betrayal seriously because loyalty means something to him beyond simple usefulness. D'Angelo is family, and Avon's relationship with him is complicated by blood, guilt, disappointment, and expectation. Avon wants D'Angelo to be stronger than he is. He wants him to accept the life because the Barksdale name comes with obligations. At the same time, Avon has real affection for him. When D'Angelo starts cracking under the pressure, Avon does not immediately turn cold. He sends him to prison with the expectation that family will hold. He believes the structure will hold. Prison, money, visits, Brianna, the family name, all of that is supposed to keep D'Angelo in place. Marlo has no version of that problem because Marlo does not build family into the business. Chris and Snoop are close to him, but even there, the bond is mostly shown through function. They protect him, kill for him, and understand his silence. The closest Marlo comes to a younger figure with real potential is Michael. And Michael becomes dangerous precisely because he is not easy to own. Michael is disciplined, smart, and serious, which should make him valuable. For Avon, a kid like Michael might become a soldier, maybe even someone to bring deeper into the organization over time. For Marlo, Michael's independence becomes a warning sign. Once Michael thinks too much, questions too much, and carries himself with too much self-possession, Marlo's system starts rejecting him. Avon is willing to absorb difficult people if they fit into the larger story of the crew. Weebay is loyal muscle, Stinkum is a soldier, Stringer is the business mind, D'Angelo is family, Bodie is a young corner kid who proves himself over time. Even Cuddy, after prison, gets a chance to come back into the fold. Avon has roles for people. He understands that a crew is made of personalities, weaknesses, histories, and debts. That makes his organization feel alive. It also makes it vulnerable. People with histories can disappoint you. People with emotions can change. People with family ties can become liabilities. Marlo strips that down. Chris and Snoop do not debate the meaning of the game in front of him. Monk manages corners. Cheese is useful until he becomes part of the next move. Little Kevin is useful until his loose handling of Randy creates risk. Prop Joe is useful until Marlo has learned enough from him. Marlo's organization feels cleaner because it has less visible emotion in it. It also feels emptier. People are attached to Marlo through fear, ambition, or survival. The system works as long as Marlo keeps winning. There is less love to betray, but there is also less loyalty to save him once the fear breaks. Look at how each man handles discipline. Avon's discipline is public enough to teach a lesson and personal enough to keep the crew in line. When people in his world mess up, there is usually a conversation around it. Someone has to explain. Someone has to answer. Orlando tries to step outside his role and get involved with drugs behind Avon's back, and Avon reacts because Orlando has violated the structure. Orlando is supposed to be clean. He is supposed to be the face of the club, the legal front, the harmless owner. When he tries to be a player, he endangers everybody. Avon's discipline protects the organization's shape. You stay in your lane or the lane closes on you. Marlo's discipline is colder because it often removes the conversation completely. Little Kevin is the clearest example. Randy gets pulled into the mess after Lex is killed, the police pressure starts moving, and little Kevin becomes a loose thread. Marlo does not care about the full moral story. He cares that the thread exists. Little Kevin goes into the vacants. The message is simple. Explanation does not save you. Under Avon, people can sometimes argue their way through a mistake if their value, history, or connections are strong enough. Under Marlo, the mistake itself becomes your identity. Once you are a risk, the system treats you like waste. That is why Avon's brutality often feels like punishment, while Marlo's brutality feels like deletion. Avon wants people to know what happens when they cross him. Marlo wants people gone so completely that the street has to whisper about where they went. The vacants become the perfect symbol of his rule. Bodies hidden inside boarded houses, sealed away from public count, erased from the official story of Baltimore. Avon's violence echoes through the neighborhood. Marlo's violence disappears into the walls. Both are terrifying. Avon makes examples. Marlo creates absence. The way they deal with enemies shows the same split. Avon treats Omar like a rival outlaw. He hates him, wants him dead, and puts money on him, but he also understands Omar as a man in the game. Omar robs drug dealers. Avon sells drugs. They are enemies who recognize the battlefield. When Omar hits Avon's stash, Avon responds with the kind of street war he understands. Brandon gets tortured and displayed because Avon needs the street to see the cost of crossing Barksdale. It is ugly, cruel, and theatrical. Avon is sending a message in blood. Marlo deals with Omar in a way that becomes more personal and more indirect. He goes after Butchie because Butchie is Omar's emotional connection. That move says a lot about Marlo's rule. He does not need a clean duel with the man who challenged him. He finds the soft place around him and destroys it. Chris and Snoop torture Butchie for information, but the deeper purpose is to drag Omar back into the city through grief. Avon wants Omar dead because Omar is robbing him and embarrassing him. Marlo wants Omar broken because Omar challenges the fear around his name. Avon can be baited by pride. The basketball game against Prop Joe shows that in a small, almost funny way, Avon wants to win. He wants his side to look strong. He wants the Barksdale name to beat Joe's side in public. It is just basketball, but it carries the same emotional logic as the corners. Reputation lives everywhere. Avon enjoys being a boss. He enjoys the rituals of it. The gatherings, the jokes, the expensive clothes, the sense that his people belong to something. His ego is dangerous because it is tied to ceremony. Marlo's ego is quieter and more poisonous. He does not need the same public performance. He often sits still and lets other people talk themselves into danger. Yet his ego is even more fragile because it is built around the name itself. My name is my name is the whole philosophy in one sentence. Avon wants respect as part of a world he already believes in. Marlo wants his name to become a law of nature. That is why he is so disturbed when he learns Omar called him out in the street and people kept it from him. The practical danger has already passed. Omar is dead, the co-op is gone, the case has been made. Still, Marlo is furious because the insult existed without his permission. Their approach to business is another major difference. Avon is a gangster first and a businessman second. He understands money, of course, and the Barksdale organization is not sloppy in the early seasons. They use pagers, code stash houses, front businesses, lawyers, and disciplined communication. Avon is not stupid. The show never presents him as stupid. His limitation is that he cannot fully separate business from the emotional demands of being Avon Barksdale. He wants territory even when Stringer sees territory as less important than product and profit. He wants war because war restores pride. Stringer wants to turn the organization into something more corporate, but Avon still hears the street calling his name. Marlo is also a gangster first, but he has a sharper instinct for learning from business structures without being softened by them. Prop Joe tries to civilize him through the co-op. Joe offers stability, good product, shared supply, reduced violence, and access to a larger network. Avon would understand parts of that, but he would also recognize the political meaning of sitting among equals. Marlo sits there and studies. He learns the connect, learns the personalities, learns the weaknesses, and waits until the teacher is no longer needed. Prop Joe thinks he is teaching Marlo how to do business. Marlo is learning how to take the whole thing. That is the key difference in how they use advice. Avon listens when advice fits his instincts. He listens to Stringer, Levy, Brianna, and sometimes even people beneath him, but there is always a point where the advice runs into who Avon is. Stringer can talk about product, real estate, and money laundering, but Avon still wants his corners. The advice can shape him, but it cannot replace him. Marlo listens with less visible resistance because he treats advice like stolen property. He takes the useful part and discards the person attached to it. Joe gives him access. Vondas and the Greeks become reachable. Once Marlo has the root, Joe's value collapses. Stringer is where the comparison becomes tragic for Avon. Avon and Stringer are almost two halves of one ruler. Avon has the street legitimacy. Stringer has the business imagination. Together, they make the Barksdale organization powerful. Apart, they expose each other's weaknesses. Stringer cannot command the street the way Avon can. Avon cannot leave the street behind the way Stringer wants. Their betrayal of each other comes from years of brotherhood, resentment, and incompatible dreams. Stringer has D'Angelo killed because he sees D'Angelo as a threat to the organization. Avon gives Stringer up because Stringer crossed a line that friendship cannot cover. Both moves are betrayals, but they hurt because the relationship was real. Marlo has no Stringer. That sounds like a strength until it becomes a weakness. Nobody beside him has enough emotional weight to challenge the direction of the whole organization. Chris can advise him, and Chris has his own intelligence, but Chris is not trying to redirect Marlo's life. Snoop follows the work. Monk handles management. Nobody is dreaming of turning Marlo's empire into condos, print shops, and political donations. That makes Marlo more unified than Avon. It also means Marlo has fewer internal breaks. Avon and Stringer destroy each other partly because they disagree. Marlo's people rarely disagree in a way that can stop him. The handling of soldiers shows the human cost of both systems. Avon's world creates people like Bodhi, who believe in the game as a rough code of conduct. Bodhi is not innocent, and the show never asks us to pretend he is. He kills Wallace, he works corners, he follows orders. Still, Bodhi grows into someone with a real sense of rules. He can understand losing, he can understand punishment. What breaks him under Marlo is the feeling that the rules no longer mean anything. People disappear into vacants. Little Kevin gets killed. The street becomes random. Bodhi can live with a hard game. He cannot live with a game where loyalty buys nothing and fear is the only language left. Avon's rule gives Bodhi a structure to believe in, even when that structure ruins him. Marlo's rule leaves him standing on a corner with no illusion left. That is why Bodhi's final stand feels like the death of an older Baltimore. He is still using the language of territory, pride, and soldiering while Marlo's machine has already moved past that. He dies because he belongs to a world Marlo has made obsolete. Cuddy shows another side of Avon's rule. When Cuddy comes home from prison, Avon gives him a chance. Cuddy tries to return to the game, realizes he no longer has the heart for it, and tells Avon directly. The remarkable part is Avon's reaction. He lets him go. More than that, he gives him money for the gym. This does not turn Avon into a good man. It shows that Avon can recognize a person's history and still respect the truth of what that person has become. Cuddy served time. Cuddy was once real in the street. Avon understands that. He can be disappointed without needing to erase him. Try to imagine that same conversation with Marlo. A soldier telling Marlo face-to-face that he no longer has the heart for the work. Maybe Chris would understand the human part. Marlo would hear weakness, risk, and possible disrespect. A person would know too much, had seen too much, and would now stand outside the organization with a clean conscience. Avon can afford that because his rule has room for memory. Marlo's rule has no safe place for former insiders. Family is another area where Avon's power feels older and messier. The Barksdale organization is tied to blood. Brianna is involved. D'Angelo is involved. Avon's name carries family pressure. That makes the empire stronger in one sense because family creates loyalty beyond money. It also poisons everything because the business can turn family love into enforcement. Brianna pushes D'Angelo to take the years because the family needs him to hold. Avon benefits from that pressure. D'Angelo's tragedy comes from being trapped between blood and conscience. Marlo seems almost free of that kind of emotional debt. We see no mother shaping his decisions, no nephew disappointing him, no sister defending the family structure, no old friend trying to pull him toward legitimacy. He moves like a man without personal history. That absence makes him frightening because there are fewer handles on him. With Avon, people can appeal to pride, friendship, family, memory, or tradition. With Marlo, the only reliable appeal is usefulness. Once usefulness fades, the person standing in front of him is already halfway gone. The co-op also reveals how each man relates to the wider ecosystem of Baltimore crime. Avon is built for competition. He understands alliances, but he prefers the clarity of us against them. Prop Joe's world of shared supply and negotiated peace feels closer to Stringer's imagination than Avon's. Avon wants to win in a way people can see. If another crew takes a corner, that corner has to be taken back. If someone challenges the name, the challenge has to be answered. War is expensive, but Avon accepts the cost because war proves the crown is still real. Marlo enters the co-op with patience, but peace never becomes his goal. He uses the room as a map. The older bosses think the co-op can contain him through profit. They assume every rational player eventually chooses money over chaos. Marlo's genius is that he lets them think that long enough to learn where the doors are. Once he can reach the Greeks, he no longer needs the table. He does not want a seat among equals. He wants the table removed. That is why Prop Joe's death lands as a turning point. Joe is clever, connected, and careful. He survives for years by reading people and lowering the temperature. Against Avon, that kind of intelligence has value because Avon still belongs to a world where relationships and reputation can be negotiated. Against Marlo, Joe misreads the hunger. He thinks mentorship creates leverage. He thinks access can be shared safely if everybody profits. Marlo accepts the lesson and kills the teacher. It is one of the cleanest examples of Marlo's rule. No sentiment, no ceremony, no long argument, just replacement. Avon's downfall comes from pressure on multiple fronts: police work, informants, the war with Marlo, Stringer's separate ambitions, and his own refusal to let go of territory. The police finally catch him with weapons because Avon is still preparing for a street war. That is perfectly Avon. Even after prison, even after all the damage, he is pulled back toward the battlefield. He cannot become Stringer. He cannot become Prop Joe. He can only become a sharper or weaker version of Avon Barksdale. Marlo's downfall is stranger because legally he almost wins. The bodies are found, the wire case is compromised, and Levy maneuvers him into a deal that keeps him alive and rich. On paper, Marlo gets the kind of exit Stringer might have wanted: money, distance, legitimacy, a chance to leave the street. Yet the final image of Marlo tells the truth. He walks away from the business people and finds a corner. Two young men do not know him, and that ignorance bothers him more than prison seemed to. He fights them, takes a small wound, and smiles because the street has recognized him again for one brief second. He gained the world Stringer wanted and immediately went looking for the only thing he ever cared about. Avon in prison still feels like Avon. When Marlo visits him for access to Sergei, Avon makes him pay. Even locked up, Avon understands status. He knows Marlo needs something. He enjoys the leverage. He is behind bars, but the old rules still give him a kind of power. Avon can lose his freedom and remain himself because his identity was never only money. It was reputation, memory, territory, and the Barksdale name. Prison takes him off the street, but it does not fully erase his place in the story. Marlo outside the game looks empty. That is the final difference. Avon's tragedy is that he cannot escape the role. Marlo's tragedy is that there may be nothing underneath the role. Avon has love, pride, anger, loyalty, nostalgia, and ego all tangled together. Marlo has appetite refined into a philosophy. He is cleaner, more efficient, more terrifying in certain ways, but he is also spiritually smaller. He wins corners, steals the connect, kills rivals, beats the co-op, and survives the case. Still, the moment people stop speaking his name with fear, the victory starts rotting in his hands. So when you bounce them back and forth, the pattern becomes clear. Betrayal under Avon is personal. Betrayal under Marlo is procedural. Discipline under Avon teaches the crew where the lines are. Discipline under Marlo teaches everyone that the line can move at any time. Violence under Avon is loud, symbolic, and tied to reputation. Violence under Marlo is quiet, hidden, and tied to erasure. Avon rules through a culture. Marlo rules through a climate. Avon wants soldiers. Marlo wants subjects. Avon wants the crown because it proves he is the king of a world he respects. Marlo wants the crown because nobody else is allowed to wear it. The Wire does not make Avon noble by placing him next to Marlo. Avon destroys lives, orders deaths, feeds the same machine, and protects his name with bodies. The comparison only shows that evil can have different textures. Avon's version of the game still has room for memory, loyalty, humor, family, and a warped sense of honor. Those things do not redeem the violence. They make the violence easier for people inside the world to understand. Marlo's version burns away the decorations and leaves the raw command underneath. Fear me, obey me, remember me. That is why Avon feels like the last boss of an older street order, while Marlo feels like what grows after that order has already started dying. Avon's Baltimore still believes in the story of the gangster. Marlo's Baltimore has learned that the story was never required. The corners only need product. The crews only need fear. The bodies only need walls to hide inside. And the name only needs to survive long enough for everyone else to lower their eyes. In the end, Avon ruled like a man defending a kingdom. Marlo ruled like a man proving kingdoms were sentimental. Avon wanted the game to recognize him. Marlo wanted the game to disappear into him. Avon lost because he could not stop being Avon. Marlo won almost everything and still walked back to a corner, bleeding from the arm, smiling at two kids who had no idea they had just given him the only kind of respect he knew.